Hey guys, Luke Dunkin here, FLW Tour Pro. We're fixing to go ride around Wheeler Lake with the FLW film crew to give you guys a sneak peek into what the Forrest Wood Cup qualifiers are going to face out on the Tennessee River the first week of August. We're starting here at Ditto Landing. This is where it's all going to kick off and go down for the qualifiers. They're going to be hanging around these docks in the morning, the first day, all fired up, getting the jitters out of the way before they go out to catch some Wheeler Lake bass. Let's go look around. All right guys, we made the 15-minute ride upriver from Ditto Landing to the Guntersville Dam, the Wheeler Lake headwaters up here. And as most of you know, in August, the fishing can get stagnant because of the water temperature, lack of oxygen. So the best place to go is where the current's generated. So a lot of these guys are going to come up here below the dam, drift around in this current and fish. The one wild card in that is there is a sign, it's a danger sign telling boats to keep away. Well, Bill Taylor, the tournament director, has formed an imaginary line from that side, from one bank of the river to the other. So it does take out a few of the key areas up here where guys would have focused, but it didn't take out all the playing field. So there will be fish caught at Guntersville Dam in the Forrest Wood Cup. All right, a bait that could definitely play at the Forrest Wood Cup is going to be a zoom swim bait like this or something similar, a hollow body swim bait. I've got mine rigged on a 1/2 ounce. This is a dirty jig swim bait head. Perfect for this amount of current flow. And what these guys will do is they'll get up here, they'll run up towards the dam, probably close to this off limits area, and start their drift back. So they're just going to throw the swim bait upstream and drift back with it. And what you're doing in that is you're hopping it over the rocks, and these bass will lay, there'll be a little trough behind a rock pile, and when that bait washes in there, that's when they get it. The benefit of doing this is you're covering a ton of water in a day. So if this is your plan and you commit to this, you're pulling up, cranking up, running up here, making a drift, pulling up, doing it again, you're not covering the same area twice. It's not like a guy that's fishing a little backwater area. And these areas up here replenish a ton. They've got tons of bait fish. This is the buffet. This is where it goes down on most of the Tennessee River chain lakes, whether it be Pickwick, Wilson, but here in particular, the bait fish congregate around these dams because there's more oxygen, lots of current. So this will definitely be a key. A swim bait up here, you could see a topwater play up here, but definitely gonna see some guys throwing some swim baits up here at the Forrest Wood Cup. Another pattern that could play up here below the Guntersville Dam would be something like slowing down, fishing a jig, maybe fishing a shaky head on these rock banks that are getting hit directly in the current. And what that does is it washes crawfish and bait down through here. It's a little different than drifting out here on the current seams and right below the dam with the swim bait, but some of these guys will pick these banks apart with a jig. This is just a 1/2 ounce dirty jig. Flip it down through there, let it drift. You watch for your line to jump. They may do this with a shaky head. They may do it with a drop shot. We got a lot of spots. A lot of smallmouth up here, so they may like, you know, the finessey stuff, but lots of big largemouth up here too. So you get that. Early in the morning, there could also be a topwater bite down these banks with a spook, a buzzbait. You could see a lot of fish chasing. Now, the schooling fish is not really something that's just in the mornings. This time of year, it gets better as the sun gets up. So you may see them, it becomes more random as the sun gets up, but it may be out here in the current. So a guy may be going down through here, flipping his jig, and all of a sudden look out here and there goes one blowing up. He picks up a topwater, throws out there and catches it. That'd be a bonus fish, of course, but you take those when you're fishing for 300 grand. If a guy commits to the upriver area on Wheeler, I wanted to show you a couple of options that he may have if he doesn't choose to fish the Guntersville Dam. This would be one. This is your typical kind of riverbank. You know, it looks like a lot of rivers, the Mississippi, the Ohio, a lot of mud, a lot of laydowns, but what a lot of folks maybe don't think about, mud is cooler in the summertime. You know, it's going to be a little different than rock, and these jokers will live around it. You know, something you may see guys do, throwing like a square bill, it's striking 1.5, throwing around some of these laydowns. They're going to be pitching jigs, maybe 1/4 ounce spinner baits because a lot of the bait fish are smaller. But as we pulled in here, we started seeing a lot of bait activity out off the bank. So you could be going down through here fishing these trees, you know, trying to find an isolated bite, and all of a sudden a school of spots and smallmouth come up schooling on the shad out in the middle of the river. It can happen anywhere on this lake right now. That's really, really a wild card more than anything, and that's suspended schooling fish. But like I said, main river banks, mud, trees, a little bit of rock, but that's what the upriver area on Wheeler looks like. All right, this is another kind of cover that you might see up the river on Wheeler Lake. Just your typical rock bluff, big chunky rocks around it mixed in. This is the kind of place a guy might stop. Say he's been up at the Guntersville Dam and catches him 4 good ones. Just looking at the watch, it's ticking down and he's only sitting on 4 keepers. You run in here, pick up Old Faithful, shaky worm, on a shaky head, a little trick worm, come down through here and you might pick up a spotted bass, you might pick up a smallmouth or a largemouth. But this upriver area on Wheeler, and it's not a well-known fact, it is loaded with spotted bass. Now a lot of them are those 12 to 14 inch cigar looking spots, but there are some 3 and 4 pounders up here. So I think any of them would take a lucky 3 or 4 pound spotted bass bite when you're sitting on 4 fish. So this is something that you would definitely see a guy do late in the day. He needs a keeper, come in here, sling a shaky head up there and hope to get one more. All right, we left the main Tennessee River channel and we came up in a feeder creek. This is actually the Flint River, and we're not too far up it here, but a lot of these feeder creeks are gonna play, whether it be Paint Rock Creek, the Flint River, Flint Creek on down towards Decatur. There are several of these that feed the main Tennessee. What you get in here is you get a lot of mud flats, a lot of laydowns, a lot of shade from these overhangs. And this is a pattern that'll play. Guys are gonna come in here, they're gonna throw a buzz bait, like we've seen at the last 2 cups. You know, Scott Canterbury at Lake Murray just about got it done on a buzz bait and a jig, but similar situation. There's gonna be brim around these laydowns and mud flats. Lots of bait fish in here. It was the first thing I noticed when we pulled in. Tons of bait hanging around, but the buzz bait could be huge, and a lot of people think, man, it's bright bluebird skies, 100 degrees. That doesn't matter. This is a bait this time of year that's gonna get you 5 good fish if you keep it in your hand. There's gonna be a lot of guys doing that. So they'll run up these things, and this river goes forever up through here. So you're gonna see guys, they may run 5, 6, 7, 8 miles up this as far as they can to try to fish for isolated fish, resident fish on the targets available, and it's definitely gonna play. All right, now we're gonna go down the lake. We've got 72 miles of water to show you guys. We've shown you the very upper end of Wheeler. We wanna see as much of it as we can in this sneak peek. All right, guys, we're about 50 miles down the lake from where we last stopped. We're in the Elk River. The Elk River is a really large tributary that runs from Tennessee all the way into the Tennessee River. It starts up at a place called Timms Ford Lake up in Tullahoma, Tennessee, runs 40 miles down through here. So it's a huge tributary. You can run almost as far as you want to up into Tennessee waters where it kind of necks down. It gets a little cooler, more current oriented. Really diverse fishery though. You can see right here, we're on some boat docks. These are just shallow docks off of a flat, kind of going into a pocket. This time of year and what we'll be facing the first week of August, you'll have schooling fish in here, chasing bait in the backs of these pockets. You'll have fish set up on these shallow docks, and then you have a lot of shallow wood in between the docks. You also have a lot of isolated wood on flats that we'll go take a look at next. On these boat docks, if I'm approaching this, I'm coming in here and I'm fishing every bit of them. Okay, I'm not just fishing the ends. I fish almost every pole, and this time of year for me, I really like the shallow walkways. I mean, the shallower the better. They lay up under there chasing those brim. You got a lot of brim still around the beds this time of year, coming up there sunning. A lot of this year's brim, last year's brim, they're a little smaller, hanging around up there, and those bass will take advantage of that. So you're gonna fish a lot of these walkways, but you know, again, this is the same bait I was using up the river, but this is just a zoom trick worm. I'll skip it on a spinning rod, on like a 1/4 ounce shaky head, 1/8 ounce shaky head if it's a little, you know, depending on how shallow. Of course, a jig is great, and you may see some of these guys skipping buzz baits under these. You know, like I said earlier, buzz bait will be a player in this tournament. Well, the guys will skip it under the walkway. So that's kind of how I would approach these docks. You're gonna fish them, you know, fish them thorough, because there's not a ton of bites under them, but you may get that 5-pound bite you need to put you to 300,000 bucks. All right, this is very typical for this time of year in the Elk River. We've pulled out on a main river flat, okay? And you can see isolated pieces of wood out here. There's a lot more under the surface that you can't see. You get a lot of debris flow that comes down this river from Tennessee, so it gets wedged on all these shallow flats and bars out through here. But what we've got is you've got this year's bait fish, okay? This year's hatch from the spawn, and they're very, very, very small. And the bass will eat those, and then you'll get gizzard shad and other smaller shad, skipjack, feeding on these too. So your bigger fish will eat those as well. So there's plenty to eat, but they just roam around. And the bass, they make these big clouds. So it's what I try to tell people a lot of times this time of year, and it's hard to wrap your head around. They use these for cover. I mean, they do. They just roam around under them. They get hungry, they go up, they chase them to the top, and they just literally, they roam with them. That's what makes this such a hard time of year. You can see these look like they're kind of getting nervous, but what I do in that situation is I just take a walking bait, spook, a gunfish like this one. But when the minnows are small, and this is just personal preference for me, I like a clear, because I feel like they don't get a good gauge on what size it is, but I can still cast it a long ways if I get one a long ways off. But on these flats, you'll see guys in the tournament, you know, just working a walking bait through those. Now, a lot of times it's going to be better when you actually see them actively busting. It's hard a lot of times to get them to come up and chase a topwater. They will in the morning sometimes, but once they get so keyed in, when the sun gets up and the minnows get on the surface, it can be hard to even trigger one to bite unless you see him actively chasing. So there'll be a lot of, you'll see a lot of this going on. This is how a lot of guys are going to fish. And you make your cast, you don't want to make one when they're not up and have one, if I'm over here and he comes up right there and then I'm doing this all day long, it'd drive you crazy, and you might miss a really, really good opportunity at a fish that could help you, win the cup. So you want to, I tend to do this a lot and ride around on the trolling motor and look for them. But schooling fish will be a major factor. If I'm approaching these schooling type fish, minnow oriented fish on Wheeler Lake, I'm going to go with a three-pronged approach most of the time. I like to start with a simple walking bait. This is a gunfish. I would also like a Strike King Sexy Dog or a Super Spook Junior, something along those lines. This in particular is one of my favorites. It's clear in color, and I know a lot of people like bone, different shad colors, but when the bait fish are really small, this clear seems to throw them off a little bit. They can't get a good read on how big it is, but it allows me to cast into them from a distance away, So a walking bait like that, sling it out there, walk it through them, it gets them really excited. I like to use that. This is my second option if they're not eating that as well or they're missing it, that is an absolute stone cold killer, and that's a Zoom Super Fluke Junior. A lot of guys throw a fluke because you can cast it on bait cast gear. I throw this on a spinning rod. This is just a 6/8 level spinning rod with light braid on it to a fluorocarbon leader on a 2/0 hook. And it's beefy enough that I can cast it out there a good distance whenever they come up chasing. And this is almost a guarantee. If you land it in one of the ripples when they're chasing and they're around that bait, they're going to eat that little guy. And I use these two when I get up on these shallower flats like this, or if I see them chasing around docks, around seawalls where they've got the bait pushed up and kind of cornered up shallow, and you can actually see them visibly chasing, those two are going to come into play. A third option for me is a Zoom swimmer on a 1/2 ounce head. Now this is the same thing, same setup I would use in the tail race below the dam that we talked about earlier, but this comes into play when I'm out off the bank, I'm on a ledge, all right, and normally you would be throwing a big cranking plug, you would be throwing a big spoon, a football jig, Carolina rig, something like that. Well, this time of year, what these fish are doing here, in my opinion, they're suspending under the bait out there just like they are on the shallow flats. So this swim bait will come into play for those suspending fish. You see the minnows, you throw it out there, kind of count it down, wind it, and a lot of times they're going to get it. You can also cast a country mile. If you were to see one come up way out there, you can get it to him if you've got it in your hand. A lot of times you can see them on the graph and know what depth you need to wind this thing. If you're seeing them, 10 feet suspended over 25, you can count it down. But that's definitely the three keys to my schooling fish approach that I would have in the boat for Wheeler Lake. Lots of the backwaters on Wheeler are going to feature these lily pads like this. It's really the only vegetation that plays on Wheeler this time of year. We used to have a lot of milfoil, hydrilla, but it's all gone. So really all we have aquatic vegetation wise, a little bit of water willow around the banks, but the water's been about a foot low most of the summer, so a lot of that's out of play because it's already really shallow. But you get these big pad fields, and you know, this that we're in right here, it's probably a foot deep, which is plenty deep, as most of you know, to support a bass. You have lots of brim, lots of bait using this for shade, but these pads look really good. I mean, obviously you're going to see some guys frogging, you're going to see, you know, a horny toad come into play in here, a swim jig. I'm slinging a buzzbait around a little bit, kind of hitting the holes. So that's another way I like to fish them, to cover water pretty quick. But these will definitely come into play for somebody. If they can crack the code, you can catch some really nice fish on Wheeler in these pads. All right, we're down on the lower end of the lake, and this is where, for me, a lot of the deep action is going to be in the cup. It's where a lot of the river ledge stuff is, your deep points, a lot of your brush piles. True river ledge fishing, more like what you'd see at Kentucky Lake. Now, there are not as many spots. That is the problem. With Wheeler, it does fish a little smaller as far as the offshore game, especially as good as these guys are with the electronics. But I've pulled in here on a place, we graphed it, and it really looks like there's a lot of white bass, but there's some bass set up on the lip of it, right on the drop. And in the afternoons, it's getting a little later in the day for us. A lot of the cup guys would be running back by now, already back at weigh-in even. But they're running a little bit of water and it's positioning the fish down. So there's a few fish out here. Deep fish will definitely play in this event. They're going to be showing them a variety of things. In my opinion, from my experience here, you know, things like this is just a mag shaky head with a Zoom Magnum trick worm on it. You're going to see football jigs. You know, you got your big 3/4 ounce football jigs, Z-crawl trailer on that right there. You're going to see drop shots, maybe a spoon or two, but you know, a big old monster worm is another thing I like to fish out here, just on a Texas rig and a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight, slinging it around out here. But in my experience here, this time of year, the crank and bite gets really tough. It's more of a drag and deal, just fishing as slow as you can to grind out 5 bites on these ledges. But they will definitely play in August. There's one. Oh, he spit it. Dadgummit. Dude, that one, like, he's got it. Hey, he's not big, but he's mighty. All I'm doing right here is I'm fishing a little offshore area. Standard summertime pattern about anywhere you go in the country. Really a Tennessee River killer though. Zoom old monster worm. There's one color, red bug. That's it. 1/2 ounce tungsten weight, and basically just dragging it around and just on a little offshore bar kind of deal. You know, from what I've seen today out here riding around on Wheeler, and in the last couple weeks since the tour ended up at Champlain, I've got to spend a little bit of time out here. It's fishing tough and it's fishing a little scattered. So for a guy to do well 4 days in a row, I think he's going to have to mix it up. He's going to have to fish shallow, you know, burn the banks, take advantage of some schooling fish situations if you get in those, and maybe find you a couple offshore spots that they're hanging around on. You know, Wheeler's a lake where you can mix it up. The deep stuff that's productive is very close to a lot of good shallow stuff. So a lot of lakes you go to, you need to commit one way or the other. Wheeler's not necessarily like that. You could run down a stretch of bank, maybe catch you 5, bounce out deep, hope to catch a couple more good ones, and then run back up and hope to cull out shallow. I mean, it can happen, particularly this time of year. Not as much current, a lot of suspended fish, a lot of fish around the bait. You know, you'll definitely see some interesting things. A couple factors that will come into play into that and deciding who wins this tournament, the time factor is going to be a big deal. A lot of the productive water is, you know, 30, 50, 60 miles away from Ditto Landing where the launch site's at. That's a big deal. You got to start thinking about gas, you know, fishing time, keeping fish alive on a long boat ride like that. That's something not a lot of people think about, but it definitely comes into play. And this is going to be a tight tournament weight-wise. I don't see anybody just running off with it. You know, it's going to take 5 solid fish a day. You know, a guy catches him 14, 15 a day, he's going to be looking pretty good come Sunday. Really good. But, you know, good luck to everybody that's there. I'll be in the air conditioning working the expo because I decided not to qualify this year. But, you know, it's not all bad. You guys will be sweating, fishing for 300 grand, and I'll be signing trading cards. Good luck to everybody. Hope you smack them.